Hello, everyone. Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. Today, since I had so much fun, the 1970s side dishes, which I know is not even all of them that were popular. Because I remember after I got done with that, I'm like, there was one I really liked that I didn't mention, but I'm going to mention it today, even though it's not a meal. It's actually a side dish. However, the rest of these would be more of your meals. I narrowed it down to 20. I left some of the ones off that the AI video was talking about. So, by the way, this is another video to go into my series of watching AI videos so you don't have to. So what I'm doing is I'm watching these different AI videos, getting some ideas, taking notes, and then putting them in human terms, as well as just fighting against AI wanting to take over everything, including YouTube. So now the us real live people, content creators, are getting pushed out because the AI is getting all the attention. So anyway, and I know a lot of people actually prefer hearing stuff like this from, well, actual people. So anyway, and by the way, please put any thoughts or ideas on this very topic. And what was your favorite meal from the 70s that was popular at the time? And yeah, put those in comments. The first one, this is one I still make from time to time. In the list I was watching, it was called Tuna Twist Casserole. I grew up, we always called it Tuna Noodle Casserole. I think that was because mom commonly used like egg noodles, not the twisty kind. But if you use the twisty kind, then it's Tuna Twist Casserole. And of course, as with a lot of things, 70s, a lot, instead of making a basic white sauce for it with mushrooms or celery or whatever you want, they would use a cream of something soup, cream of mushroom, cream of celery, etc. We're a common base. But any casserole with a creamy type, sauce, it's so easy to make your own white sauce. I have videos on this. But it's super simple. In fact, now I do all of my white sauces pretty much, I would say 98% of the time now I use milk powders, dairy powder. So I'll use butter powder, heavy cream powder, and whole milk powder. And then I'll make a pretty rich white sauce out of that. And I rarely ever use tuna because we still are working through that home canned salmon from the salmon. When Patrick went fishing with his dad a few years back, and they caught a whole bunch of salmon, and his dad sent him home with all his too. So I had a lot to can up, and that I like it better than tuna in the casserole, but it was always one of my favorite. Now, commonly people would add things like celery, peas, etc. I just add whatever veggies I have on hand at the time. A lot of times I'll put in my chopped dehydrated zucchini into the white sauce and let it rehydrate in the sauce as it's cooking. And I always put cheese on top, like a nice hefty layer of cheddar on the top. I noticed as I was looking up pictures of it, like, man, I don't really see any that put cheese on it. I know people have put cheese in it, like shredded cheese, but I just put it right on the top. So that's number one. Number two, I've never made this, but it's a frosted meatloaf. I think I've heard of it before, but I'm like, wait, frosted meatloaf. I've heard of that. It sounds disgusting, but it's not. And I'm sure a lot of people watching that are familiar with it know exactly what it is. So what the frosted meatloaf was is you made your meatloaf, and then you made your mashed potatoes, and then you spread the mashed potatoes over the top of the meatloaf before you baked it. And that's where you got your frosted meatloaf. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know that I would try that, but an interesting twist on your standard meatloaf. Now, I do like adding interesting twists to my standard meatloaf. Like I did a video years ago on making an Italian meatloaf where I put Italian seasonings into the meatloaf itself and then made my homemade Italian sauce and then put that over the top of the meatloaf. And that's pretty good. I've done that a couple of times. Sometimes I'll give it a more Mexican flavor. it's just fun to kind of mix it up. This one I know I've had and I've heard of before, but in the 70s, it was a lot of your kind of Hawaiian flair, tropical flair dishes were pretty popular. And so there was the Waikiki meatballs. Meatballs were a pretty popular dish in one way or the other, but one of those popular dishes was the Waikiki. So you had like pineapple, some kind of pineapple sauce or any other tropical fruit you wanted to add to it. And you cooked the meatballs. You would have likely browned the meatballs first like you normally do, and then you cook them the rest of the way in this tropical sauce blend. I do make meatballs from time to time, but usually it's something we'll do in a white gravy and then serve it over rice. I think the Waikiki would be a good one also over rice if you wanted to serve it over something. Here was another one. Now, this wouldn't apply to us exactly, but because of the type of meat it is, but you could always switch it up. This, again, this isn't really what I'd consider a meal. I consider it more of a side dish, but I went ahead and wrote it down because that was the other thing about this video. Even though it said meals, I was thinking main dishes. They listed a lot of things that were more side dishes, and some of them the same that I mentioned in last week's video. But anyway, deviled ham logs. So it was any kind of deviled meat really mixed with cream cheese, seasonings, and rolled in chopped nuts or potato chips. So this would be something you could serve with crackers and stuff. But so even though it's a side dish, I thought I'd leave it in because I'm like, well, that sounds really good. I could see doing some kind of deviled meat, a meat puree. Or I do something like this, I guess you could say, in the fact that I do the salmon dip. And that's in cream cheese, and then I add onions and garlic, but I don't make it like a log and roll it in nuts or potato chips for that matter. But that sounds kind of good. But anyway, this was a common dish that was served. Again, sounds to me more like a side dish or an appetizer. This one sounded really interesting. Never heard of this. It was called Chinese pie. Ground beef, onions, cream corn, and that was then wrapped in mashed potatoes. Like they wrapped it in the mashed potatoes, and it looked a lot like maybe a dumpling. And then you bake it until it was browned. So I thought that sounded kind of good. Another meatball one was porcupine meatballs. I think I've heard of these before too, but I don't know that I've ever had them. And basically it was just the uncooked rice was put into the meatballs, and then though the meatballs were cooked in tomato sauce, and so then the rice, as it would cook in there in the meatballs in the sauce, and then it would look like kind of spiky. So that's how it got the name porcupine meatballs. Does anybody? Oh, yep. Chick Girl says, I love porcupine meatballs. Okay, so I'm to the one. This is another side dish that I'm like, why wasn't that in the list? I should have added it myself, but I didn't even think about it until after I was done doing that live. And that is carrot raisin salad. I loved carrot raisin salad. I've always loved carrot raisin salad. I remember when I was a kid, when I first saw it, I'm like, that looks kind of gross. But I tried it. Mom was always very strict about me trying things. So I was the same way with my kids. And I loved it. So I think, isn't it, I've never made it, but basically I know it's like shredded carrots and raisins, and then mayonnaise, sugar, some add coconut and pineapple to it as well. Again, they like getting those tropical flavors in there, which I think sounds good. I don't know that I've ever had it with pineapple and coconut, but I'm pretty sure all I've ever had was the standard carrot raisin salad, and I loved it. It's just kind of a fun way to get some more vegetables in and in a different color besides green. Just so you know that anything I mention that's a pork product, if you're like me and you don't eat pork products, you can always just do something different. Come up with a different idea if you like the basic idea. Use any other kind of meat. But this one I think I've also heard of but never ever had, and I'm really curious as to if anyone out there has had this and what they thought of it. And it was a ham banana hollandaise. And so they would take the bananas and wrap them in thin hand slices and then make a hollandaise sauce and pour that over it and bake it. And I thought it was interesting. And I wonder if it's any good, I wonder how it would taste with something like, I could see turkey, like turkey slices being a good replacement for that. This one I liked, though I've never had, and this was a real common cheap way to have hamburgers, but in a different form, and it was hamburger boats. And so you take your hamburger buns and you hollow out the bread, and then you toast it, and then you fill it with your browned ground beef, spices, veggies, and top it with cheese. I thought that sounded kind of good and kind of a fun way. It sounds like something kids would really enjoy. Okay, another one. Now I mentioned quiche in last week's video because I was comparing the souffle to, the spinach souffle being one of those kind of side dishes, but quiche as a main dish. So quiche Lorraine was typically eggs, Swiss cheese, bacon, onions. And of course, for me, some people probably used ham pieces. For me, I would just, if I ever made a quiche again, if Patrick would be willing to eat one for dinner, because I don't want to make it for breakfast, I would use beef bacon in this. That Painted Hills beef bacon is such a good replacement for any pork bacon. I love it. I like it better than pork bacon. I can honestly say that. Not so much turkey bacon, but the beef bacon. Okay, this one I have made. I haven't made it in a while, but that's beef stroganoff. So Americans took the Russian beef stroganoff and basically Americanized it. And basically it's just like a ground beef and mushrooms. It's a very simple, inexpensive dish, which a lot of these are. Because the 70s was also about making inexpensive meals. And this says onions, white sauce, served over egg noodles. But the way I learned it wasn't just a standard white sauce. You actually use sour cream in there. Chicken Devon, which I'm pretty sure I've had or made something very, very similar. And it's simply like a casserole made with chicken and broccoli baked in a cream sauce and topped with cheese and breadcrumbs. Or you could use cracker crumbs. Most of us have who make our own breads. A lot of times we can have some, left little bits of bread left over. They're getting a little dry. Those are the perfect things to use for your breadcrumbs for any of this stuff for toppings. And you bake it and then the breadcrumbs get kind of crispy on top. Potato peel soup. So obviously people who were really scrimping and saving would save up those potato peels and just make them into a soup, just like you would with, using the bones. So you'd have your bone broth and then you'd throw in, after you strain all that out, throw in your potato peels from maybe you made mashed potatoes or something, and whatever vegetables, herbs, spices you want to add and make potato peel soup. Sometimes people added milk or cream to it to make a more creamy kind of soup. Now, this one I'm reading off just because it was interesting. I don't know that I would do this. And again, if I was to do this, let me just read it. Again, it's another one of those I'm curious to see if anybody in the comments or in the chat has ever made this or had it. And it was a cherry cola pulled pork. I could see doing this with like a roast like elk or beef, like that beef roast I did in the crock pot yesterday. I let it cook all day and I love that I can plug it into the solar power, and it just was falling apart. But apparently the cherry cola adds an interesting kind of flavor as well as a glaze. And I thought that might be interesting. Now, I do like to keep on hand, especially when there's any kind of family events coming up. I have a little refrigerator we keep in this big great room, my ex dance room / martial arts room. Now it's our great room that we use for a lot of things, and typically family gatherings happen in here because it's the biggest room in the house. And so I have a little refrigerator where I keep healthier sodas in. So I have like the Ollie Pops, and they have a cherry cola that tastes pretty decent. So I might try that with a roast at some point. But I would still like some feedback and see what people thought about that before I try it. But anyway, a lot of these meals, they were things that people had on hand, and they would just were trying to be creative and put things together to save money. And what's this one? Let's see. I've done Dr. Pepper brisket. Okay. And Olipop also has their own version of Dr. Pepper that's pretty good. I forget what it's called, Dr. Goodwin or something like that, because obviously they can't call it Dr. Pepper. Okay, salmon patties with cream potato or cream peas. This was a pairing. You had to have your salmon patties with creamed peas. I'm trying to remember ever having that, and I've never made salmon patties. I always say when I think of it being such a thing, I'm like, I got to try making those sometime. Now, what I do like to do every so often is make what I call beef veggie fritters. Usually I'll do this during the time of the year where the potatoes are ready and the zucchini is ready and the zucchini's coming in like crazy. And then you'll shred up your onions, your zucchini, and your potatoes. Now you could make little vegetable fritters out of just those, but then I take all that and mix it in with the ground beef and then make little patties out of them. And those are really good. And I fry them in coconut oil. Oh my goodness, those are good. I haven't made them in a while, though. I have a video or two out about it, but I haven't made them in a while. But boy, they are yummy. The tricky part is that they're kind of a one dish meal, so it's kind of boring looking. You got your vegetables. Oh, carrots! I forgot carrots. Shredded carrots in there too. So you got your vegetables with the zucchini and the carrots, and then you've got your meat, and then you got your starch with the potatoes. So it's basically a one dish meal. So I'm always like, what should I put as a side? Salad is a good side for that, but really any other kind of vegetable you can do if you want. We're number 16 now. Egg drop soup, another one I've crazily not made yet, though I've made something similar. So egg drop soup, I was surprised to read that, I always thought of it just being an Asian soup. But apparently it was a very popular soup in the 70s because it was cheap. Now, with a hot and sour soup, which I have made and do have an old video out on, you do a similar idea. But the difference is you got chicken in there and you've got some other stuff in there, but you might scramble up an egg and then you slowly pour the egg. The soup has to be really hot and you slowly pour your egg into the soup as you're stirring it. That's why it's called egg drop soup. So egg drop soup is made the same way. And then it will kind of ribbon out and can make a really good healthy soup that way, especially if you don't have, if meat is really expensive and you don't have good access to it, but you have eggs, especially if you have your own chickens. It's a cheap way to add protein. In fact, the other day normally when I make a fried rice, I'm making it when I have some kind of leftover meat. And, whether it be chicken or beef, sometimes I'll do it with salmon, leftover salmon. However, this last time I went to make it, I realized I'd already used up all the chicken and made a chicken bone broth, but I didn't have any of the meat left over from the chicken. And so I thought, wait a minute, I know what I'm going to do. So I took the chicken broth I had made, instead of dehydrating it and stuff, I've just been using it up. And I cooked the white rice instead of just using plain water, I used the chicken bone broth I had made, cooked the white rice in that. And then I scrambled up an egg and then chopped it up and then added that in for the protein. And so that was a pretty good way to cook up some rice. So if you've got a lot of bone broth made up and maybe you don't feel like canning it or dehydrating it like I usually do, use it to cook up some rice. And if you can't have white rice, then another kind of healthy grain, like I was talking last week about the barley, try doing that. Yes, boxed macaroni and cheese was a very popular dish to serve in the 70s. Now, here's the sad part about this is I'm sure back then boxed mac and cheese wasn't quite as bad as it is now. I don't know. I was a kid. I didn't read ingredients. You just assumed it was a food product. It's supposed to be good. Oh, the days of total ignorance. And here's the thing. When I was going through Amy Decision's Tightwad Gazette books, she did a lot of stuff from scratch. But when it came to macaroni and cheese, she would buy, you could get boxes of mac and cheese, like 4 or 5 boxes for $1. And so in the long run, you were actually saving money, because to buy the cheese fresh and grate it up and then make the sauce and do all that, it's a lot more expensive. And I'm sure it probably still is a lot more expensive, because you're actually using real ingredients when you make your macaroni and cheese from scratch. You're using real ingredients, because you're using real cheddar, real milk, real butter, real noodles. It's a real macaroni. But you can get organic macaroni noodles, pasta. Like I do get from Azure Standard. Just buy a big old bag of it. So if I'm in the mood for macaroni and cheese and I want actual macaroni shaped noodles, I have them. It is more expensive to make it healthy, but it's still relatively cheap, and you can add meat to it. If it's one of those things, especially when you've got a lot of hamburger meat, ground meat of any kind, and you're wanting to really stretch it, you can just brown it up, add a little bit in there, so you get a little bit more protein. It is not as frugal to make it yourself. There are things that aren't as frugal to make it yourself, especially if you're going with high quality ingredients. But mac and cheese is still a great dish, and you can make it, it's so versatile in the fact that you can add whatever you want to it. You can add broccoli. Again, with the zucchini, I like to dice and dehydrate up a lot of my zucchini. That'd be something I'd cook in the sauce as I'm making it, so it would rehydrate, and then I'm getting the vegetables in there too. Or you can even do half macaroni with half little pieces of cauliflower, so you're not getting quite so much carbs in there. And another one I keep saying I'm going to make, and then I forget about, is stuffed bell peppers. So ground beef, rice, tomato sauce, and onions, all stuffed into a gutted out green pepper. You cut the top off, and doesn't have to be green. I've always seen it in green. And then you just, take all the guts out and then put your meat, rice, tomato mixture on the inside, and then bake it. Okay, there was one more on here, and that was hamburger gravy over bread. Again, a lot of the white sauce stuff you see in these 70s dishes. So hamburger gravy, the brown hamburger and a white sauce, whatever your herbs and spices you're going to add to that, and served over typically white bread. Now, this is, again, similar to my meatballs and gravy. Similar idea, but we serve it over rice. So those were the 20 forgotten meals. Now, some of these I have forgotten, honestly. Some of them I do make. Some of them I've never heard of. Some of them I would do differently if I was ever going to make them. Thanks so much for coming in. Take care, and God bless.